Welcome to The Beat, everyone. I'm Jason Johnson, in for Ari Melber. We start with Kamala Harris spelling out her vision for the economy amid Donald Trump's ongoing upward-downward spiral that his own allies warn is destroying his campaign. All setting the stage for the Democratic National Convention next week. This is a view inside the hall in Chicago. While in North Carolina, Harris is greeted today by Democratic Governor Roy Cooper. Cooper at one time was rumored as a VP pick. He's now all aboard the Harris-Walz train. The good vibes continuing as Harris engaged in that time-honored political tradition of cradling a baby. Before unveiling a plan she says will help families and rein in corporate greed. Her first serious policy speech since launching her bid.
Under my plan, more than 100 million Americans will get a tax cut. But believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. We will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes. My administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home. Now is the time to chart a new way forward, to build.
They keep stumbling onto new campaign slogans. This is a critical moment for the Harris campaign. One of the single biggest political issues has been inflation. It's finally dropping, and today Harris arguing that Trump's tax giveaways to billionaires, along with his other policies, will raise prices on American families.
It will mean higher prices on just about every one of your daily needs. A Trump tax on gas, a Trump tax on food, a Trump tax on clothing, a Trump tax on over-the-counter medication.
Harris has denounced Trump as weird and out of step, a divisive figure who is dangerous on everything from women's rights to health care to, our actual democracy. Today, she's opening a new line of attack, suggesting Trump will harm people where they feel it immediately, in their wallets. Part of a larger strategy that has Democrats confident, now eyeing the very state Harris was in today, North Carolina. It hasn't gone blue since Barack Obama, and before that, not since Jimmy Carter in 1976. Kamala Harris and her campaign are hoping to change that. Joining me now is Francesca Chambers, White House correspondent with USA Today, who's been covering Harris for 5 years, and Juanita Tolliver, Democratic strategist, MSNBC political analyst, and author of the upcoming A More Perfect Party, The Night Shirley Chisholm and Diane Carroll Reshape Politics. So excited to have you all starting off. Francesca, I'll begin with you. You've been following Harris for years. I am curious as to what you see are the main changes and how she sort of evolved as a candidate. It's not just that the speech today was compelling and exciting and talking about policy, but I mean, to rock the Carolina blue when you're in North Carolina, that is a level of campaign confidence that I have not seen in a long time. How do you think that the sort of strategy of this campaign has changed as she's gained momentum in just the last 3 weeks?
Well, even just recently, as you're noting, there's been a vibe shift. If you looked at the event that she had with President Joe Biden yesterday, when she took the stage and she was talking, there was a confidence there where she was leading the ticket and she was in charge. And what I'd observed earlier in the administration was that at times you could just tell that she was holding back, or at least it felt that way, because she had taken positions that were not always the same as President Biden's when they were both candidates competing in that Democratic primary. But when you are vice president, your job is to push for the president's policies, to speak on behalf of the president of the United States. And as Joe Biden can tell America, he knows what it's like when you get in front of the president of the United States on a policy that they hadn't yet announced. So Kamala Harris earlier in the administration was trying not to do that, but it often led to situations where then she either tripped over her words or it seemed that she just had a lack of confidence in the job that she was doing, and you don't really hear that as much anymore.
Juanita, what I'm looking at now is there is a new path to victory. So there's a Washington Post story that says that now the Harris campaign, because of recent polling, they have an opportunity to not just possibly win the Sun Belt states, but win the Midwest as well. Now, I've always joked that, you know, these you can't trust polls. These polls ain't loyal. You don't know what's happening until you see how campaigns actually operate on the ground. But is the fact that the Harris campaign is spending time in a place that only 2 Democrats have won in the last 50 years a sign that their internal polling is showing that they're in good shape, or are they just shooting for a 50-state plan?
I think the map has expanded considerably, one, with the energy around Kamala Harris, but also with the investments that are being made by the campaign. They are playing across the country, and those investments go beyond, of course, this trip, which is the vice president's 16th trip to North Carolina, but it also goes into the ground game that they're investing in, which we know Republicans aren't matching. Republicans have been pulling people out of the field, whereas Democrats have been doubling down on field organizing. And as a field organizer and a Carolina girl, I know that's going to go a long way, because in North Carolina, you absolutely have to not only engage all those college towns we're familiar with, Jason, but also those rural communities, those suburban communities. And so that's what I think the Harris campaign is doing. The last thing I'll say about her speech is that she was highly relatable today, Jason. When she talked about knowing what it's like to struggle to make ends meet, or the reality that even with all the economic wins the Biden-Harris administration has seen, there are some people still struggling. That is what matters. That's what voters are going to remember, that they heard her and her understanding of what it takes, and then her vision to try to close those gaps for individuals, whether it's that help with the down payment for first-time home buyers or the child tax credit, which research has shown lifts millions of children out of poverty.
Now, Juanita, I wanted to follow up on this because, yes, we both share our Tar Heel history at UNC Chapel Hill. If you're shooting for the Sun Belt states, if you're shooting for states in the South, there has to be a different kind of strategy, right? Voter suppression in Michigan and Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, it's not as bad, often because these places have Democratic governors, as you see with, say, Republican-led legislatures or Republican governors when you're talking about places like North Carolina or Georgia. What are some strategies that the Harris campaign would have to employ, say, differently in North Carolina in order to get out the vote that you may not have to worry about in Pennsylvania, or you may not have to worry about in Arizona?
The repeated interactions with voters, Jason, is critical. And when I tell you, organizers in states like Georgia and North Carolina are exhausted, but the reality is they have to have repeated interactions with voters in person, on the phone, via text, via email, week after week in the lead up to November, because those conversations aren't just remember to turn out to vote. It's check your voter registration status, because this state is doing random things that could try to remove you from voter rolls. It's also make sure you know your polling location, because this state has closed polling locations or removed ballot boxes where you could previously drop them off. So it's a repeated interaction, but also that continuous voter education, given the voter suppression laws we've seen enacted.
Francesca, I am looking at this new map, and I'm also noticing that the expansion of the campaign is not just on the ground, but it's also online. We have Tim Walz, who just started his TikTok today. He's already up to several 100,000 people following him one way or another. What is the role that you see, having followed the Harris campaign, what is the role that you see them taking when it comes to social media? You know, are they going to do more things on YouTube as they did yesterday? Are they going to try more things on TikTok? Or are they really having sort of more of a ground game campaign? What have you noticed in the changes over the last couple of weeks?
Well, both. And from the very beginning, since she became the candidate at the top of the ticket, they've really leaned into social media and into those memes. When it comes to the ground game, though, I just wanted to touch on the point in North Carolina. Democrats in the state of North Carolina have been saying that it's winnable this entire cycle. And what they have done within the state party there is to go through the states, especially the rural areas, and try and figure out where there's been this attrition of voters, particularly Black voters, over the last decade or so, and try and get them re-registered to vote. And that was happening, that work, prior to Kamala Harris being on top of the ticket. They felt that if they could just get them energized, that they could win the state again, because they did, as you noted, in 2012. So when you look at the states that Kamala Harris is targeting, they're largely the same exact states that Joe Biden was targeting. But Democrats feel that between the ground game that they already had and the new enthusiasm, that they can turn those into victories, including in states that they lost, like North Carolina, which was by less than 2 points in the last cycle.